Good evening. This is Maestro Cretella with a Company of Heroes 2 cast. Today we have a 1v1 on a map that I am still learning the name of. Our first player right here, playing as the Ostheer, or the Ostheer, as I've heard that it's more accurately pronounced, is HelpingHans. He's a pretty good Company of Heroes player, as far as I know. His opponent, on the other side, is LOD Locke, or maybe we'll just call him Locke. Locke is playing as the Soviet Union. And an interesting thing we see here is that Locke is actually already building his first production building with his starting resources. This is something that is optional. You don't have to do it. And the Soviets actually have quite a bit of flexibility with how they can do their openings. You can actually just send your combat engineers immediately out to start capturing territory and then just start building conscripts from the field headquarters to get a lot of units out very quickly and get a lot of early map presence. That's one choice you can do, and it's also a great choice because you can get out on the field faster than the Germans, and conscripts are already a very good unit that have a lot of scaling in the course of the game. But Locke decided to put down his support weapon camp. That gives him access to Maxim machine guns. It gives him access to mortars as well as the divisional field guns. So there are a lot of good things about that. First of all, it can give you very early access to an anti-tank gun. But what we're seeing Locke do here is that he's getting multiple machine guns, which is something that it's something I like. It's something that I've done before myself. And it's also something that, to be honest, is a little cheesy since the Maxim gun is, in my opinion, and definitely in the opinion of many others, a little bit too good right now. It has a pretty short setup time, a very, very short de-setup time, and it also has 6 men, making it very durable. The disadvantages are mainly that it has a very narrow firing arc, but there are still a lot of hilarious shenanigans with this Maxim gun. Fortune, who I play with quite a bit, he showed me how he could just run straight up to a unit, set up the Maxim gun, and just start firing point blank in the face of his opponent. And I've done that quite a bit myself, and it's something you can do because the Maxim gun has such a short setup time and de-setup time. And even if you get flanked, you can usually just turn around and set up again on whatever unit that has flanked you. It's something that they probably should adjust, to be honest. At the very least, it definitely needs a longer de-setup time. I mean, short setup, as it is, the setup time is much longer than the de-setup time, which is almost instant. And that's something that probably should be changed. I mean, we're actually seeing it right now. It de-set up almost instantly. There's nothing in Dawn of War 2 that has anything even close to having a de-setup time like that. And they're also going to take the building. If you notice, they actually smashed the windows inside the building, which is a very nice touch. Just so that the units can shoot out of it. So yeah, we actually have 3 machine guns. And these machine guns are very tough because they have 6-man squads. And one of the things that was said in a cast by the Frontline Network is, if you think about it, those extra members, you kind of have like a 5-man conscript squad attached to a machine gun, which is very, very nice. But that's Locke's opening play. I think that Maxim gun is pretty strong to start out, especially in building, since I think Germans don't quite have... I personally think their early garrison counters are a little inadequate. Now, it's a little confusing because the Grenadiers, they actually have their rifle grenade, which does function as anti-garrison. And that is something that it functions as anti-garrison, but most of the time it's not enough to dislodge these very durable Soviet setup teams like this Maxim gun. That is most of the time. Every once in a while, you will actually get a random chance to destroy a building entirely with a rifle grenade. Now it's a bit of an element of randomness. It may even be a bug. You can actually destroy the building entirely with the Grenadier's rifle grenade. Most of the time, it does not happen. Although, if it does actually happen, of course, whenever a unit is inside a building and the building gets destroyed, that will straight up wipe the unit regardless of how much health it has. So we've been looking at Locke's side. Locke he has that machine gun play. He's also been taking the buildings, which is, again, particularly pretty strong compared to the original Company of Heroes. Buildings are much more effective. They provide a lot more protection than the original Company of Heroes. Now, compared to Dawn of War 2, Dawn of War 2 buildings actually provide even more protection than the buildings in this game from regular small arms fire. But as Dawn of War 2 players, we also know that buildings become a death trap once your opponent actually has anti-garrison. That's not as much of the case in this game. Buildings are, in general, a bit safer than that.
Engineer standing by.
Now, it's also interesting to see the resource configuration or just the chosen resource territories that Locke has gotten. He has actually not captured the munitions point right next to his base, as well as the 2 adjacent territory points next to that munitions point. So he's not getting those resources, which would be very easy to capture. That being said, he is going for cutoffs on his opponent. Cutoffs is that in Company of Heroes 2, as well as the original Company of Heroes, territories actually need to be linked so that you can get resources to them. So one of the strategies is that you capture a point, or at least decap a point that is close to your opponent's base, and then they will actually not be getting any of the resources. They will actually not be getting any of the resources that would be connected to that territory. Even if they have territory, if it's not connected to their base in some way, they won't be getting those resources. So on HelpingHans' side, he has a Flamer half-track. This is a very, very popular unit choice in Company of Heroes 2, in part because the early opening, especially with conscripts and also with the machine guns, can be pretty tough for the Germans to deal with in some ways. And the Flamer half-track is one of the main answers to that. Flame weapons are very, very effective in Company of Heroes games, more so than in Dawn of War 2 games. They function as anti-garrison, but you don't just get them for anti-garrison. You actually just get them for anti-infantry, and they're very powerful for that purpose. And since they function as anti-garrison, and given what I said about the relative prevalence of garrison use in this game, they're useful for that too. Basically in general, the Flamer half-track actually counters pretty much everything that Locke has, except for his field guns. So those field guns, they have very long range. If anything, I would say the range of the anti-tank weapons in this game is quite a bit longer than in Dawn of War 2. That being said, there are the field guns themselves do not necessarily snare a vehicle. They may cause a vehicle critical that can do something like damage or destroy the engine, which will slow its speed or immobilize it. And they also cannot retreat. The Soviet weapon teams are very tough, though. So with 6 men, they have a relatively decent chance of making it out alive, even when being flanked. That being said, at least it looked like to me like HelpingHans was maybe going for a flank with his Flamer half-track. He seems to still not quite going for, and that's what I thought he was going for, and that would be a very nice play. It is going to be tough, though, with Locke having 2 field guns, however. So even if one field gun is getting hit by that half-track, even if the half-track does get around it, Locke can position his other field gun so that it can attack that half-track and either pressure it to go away or destroy it entirely. And to be honest, right now, the loss of a the loss of a half-track is probably going to hurt more than the loss of a field gun. And I think one of the main reasons I'm saying that is the fact that the field gun will probably get decrewed and then it can be recrewed. Whereas if a half-track goes down, it's probably just going to die entirely, and that half-track will just straight up be gone. But we also have a pack anti-tank gun from Helping Hans. It's quite a bit smaller. It only has a 3-man crew, and it does not have an artillery ability. So it actually just seems to be straight up inferior to the Soviet field gun at the moment. I think I've heard that it does actually fire faster, but the Soviet field gun overall really does just seem to have a lot more going for it. But over here, we do have a machine gun in the building that is getting flamed out. One of the great things about this flamer half-track, now, obviously, there's no melee in this game, so melee does not do extra damage on retreat because melee does not exist. However, an interesting thing is that I believe flame weapons do full damage on retreat. And there we saw that that Soviet machine gun was just straight up taken out by this flame half-track. But one of the great things about that flame half-track is that infantry-based flame weapons, such as the flamers you can get on combat engineers, pioneers, or penal battalions, those units must be standing still entirely in order to fire their flame weapons, which is actually, obviously, it's different from Dawn of War 2. I believe it's also different from the original Company of Heroes. In both of those games, you could fire on the move with a flamer weapon. So the vehicle-based flame weapons, the Flammenwerfer half-track, as well as a Soviet scout car with a flamer inside of it, can actually fire on the move, which is very, very good for killing retreating units, especially since the vehicles, as it is, already have a higher speed than infantry units. So we have a lot of light vehicle plays from both of the players, and that's very interesting considering these light vehicles. They are light vehicles in the sense that they function a lot like a Sentinel would in Dawn of War 2, which means that they can be they can take damage from small arms fire. They are still most ideally countered by actual anti-tanks, such as these field guns. And Helping Hans has been doing very, very well to keep his half-tracks out of the firing arc of those field guns. Certainly, if it were me or even just most other players probably would have already lost a half-track just by driving their half-tracks around, just looking for enemies, and then just wandering into the arc of a field gun. I have noticed that the way Helping Hans is using his half-tracks, he's using them very cautiously. He's also putting them in positions like this, where he's sending his half-track to a place where the anti-tank guns or the field guns aren't present. One of the things that Locke is doing that maybe he could be doing a bit better is that he's bunching up his field guns in the same place. He's got 2 field guns in the same place. So one of the things that Helping Hans is doing is that he's splitting up his half-tracks. So we also have a light vehicle play from Locke. We have the half-track. And these half-tracks have been upgraded to have quad 50 cal machine guns, which function as anti-aircraft. That means they can take out the airplanes that come from many of the aircraft globals, whether they are bombing runs or recon flights. And they're also very good as anti-infantry. They also even suppress. But this vehicle has actually been very underused. And I think maybe part of the reason it's been underused, as a transport, usually the scout car takes priority over it. Just that's what people choose to use. And then from the building that you get the half-track out of, people would usually rather go for T-70 light tanks or T-34 medium tanks, especially that the T-70 light tank isn't a whole lot more expensive than these half-tracks, while being quite a bit tougher and more oppressive. But we are seeing how these quad 50 cals are kind of, well, they're actually not being that effective, but they're still shooting. One did take an anti-tank gun hit. So one of the things I noticed that Helping Hans is generally doing a little bit better than Locke is that Helping Hans is doing more to spread spread his half-track. Right now he does actually have them together, whereas Locke is generally keeping his half-tracks together. He's also generally keeping his field guns together. But it still looks like Locke seems to be pushing forward and seems to be having a bit of an advantage in this engagement, as it is HelpingHans is backing up his anti-tank gun into a corner where it can't really move without having to go back into the line of fire, so it's not a good position. Certain infantry units can actually vault over cover, so like these walls here that the pack is right next to, certain infantry units can actually vault over that, but the pack can't, because it can't just jump over that cover with that pack anti-tank gun. Weapon teams in general cannot vault over cover, whereas regular infantry units, pioneers, grenadiers, conscripts, those can. Nice, we got a flank by the flamer half-track. So, here we go with what I said about kind of like overlapping fields of fire. We actually have a smoke bomb right there, a smoke projector, which actually blocks line of sight. Oh, wow. So, unfortunately, I thought HelpingHans was going to get around with that flank, but he lost one half-track. One half-track is down, the other one is still alive. And we also have that Panzer IV, but that Panzer IV is probably done because we already have a T-34 from Locke. And we have some anti-tank gun follow-ups. And wow, Panzer IV died pretty much immediately from HelpingHans. Now we have a Soviet machine gun in the building. I think HelpingHans could very safely move his half-track to this side right here on the road where his Panzer Grenadiers are. They would be able to hit that machine gun in the building while still being safe from the Soviet field guns. One field gun has been decrewed. We also have a Panzerfaust going down to try to take out that half-track, or at least to give it a damaged engine, since Panzerfaust from the Grenadiers are generally not going to take out vehicles. They're generally not strong enough, and they are only single shot for a munitions cost. But they're usually used as an early vehicle counter. They can also be used if your Grenadiers are just what you have available, and they can cause a vehicle critical, like this damaged engine, which will slow down the half-track, make it more vulnerable to follow-up anti-tank. We have another T-34 here, whereas HelpingHans now has no tank and no anti-tank. He backed up his pack into a corner, and he ended up getting it decrewed. So HelpingHans is in a very uncomfortable position now. He's getting a new anti-tank gun, a new pack, in part because I think that's roughly his only choice. And that's kind of a loaded statement. It's obviously not his only choice. There are plenty of choices he could make, but it seems to be the only choice for him that could actually keep him in the game and give him something to actually threaten this T-34. I guess he could put a Panzerschreck on one of his Panzer Grenadiers, which would give them some anti-tank firepower and some pretty good anti-tank firepower. But that also is pretty expensive, and it's also something that you do need to be pretty close. And it can be sometimes hard to protect your Panzer Grenadiers, or just to keep them alive on their approach to a vehicle so that they can kill it. Now this T-34 here suffered a lot of damage, and it has engine damage. It's at like 25% health. I think it drove over a Teller mine, a German anti-tank mine. Now mines in this game, mines overall in Company of Heroes are a much bigger part of the game than in Dawn of War 2. Both factions have them. That being said, I know that people are not satisfied with the current state of the German mines. You either get a extremely expensive mine quadrant that has warning signs letting you know where the mines are, and then you also get the Teller mine, which is strictly an anti-tank mine, and it's also pretty expensive. The Soviets, by comparison, get an all-in-one mine for a lower munitions cost, which is, and it's probably not quite as powerful to vehicles as the Teller mine, but it still seems to be just that the Soviets get more cost-effectiveness and utility out of their mines than the Germans. And oh wow! So we already have a KV-8 from Locke. This is a flamer tank. It is extremely powerful. extremely good as anti-infantry. Wow, oh my god, Locke is being extremely oppressive there. He also used his incendiary barrage global to take out that anti-tank gun. The incendiary barrage is just a off-map artillery strike for the Soviets. It is strictly an anti-infantry nuke, but it covers a huge area and it does a lot of damage over time, so it can be very good for decrewing those slow-moving anti-tank guns, especially those Soviet anti-tank guns that have, I mean, not those Soviet, the German anti-tank guns that only have 3-man weapon teams. So if we take a look at Locke's composition, he actually still has both of his half-tracks still alive. So that's very, very interesting. These half-tracks, and I like that here. We see one, it's actually using the overdrive ability, allowing it to go faster. And I think he's doing that so he can go over here to intercept these capping pioneers. And look at how fast that thing goes. But Locke is still using those light vehicles, and those light vehicles are something that generally they don't scale too well, and you actually see quite a bit more of that in Company of Heroes 2 than in, obviously, Dawn of War 2, which is that you have many more units that are actually just not really designed to scale into the late game, and it's so much in the sense that they're not even really probably not even going to survive, and then it gets to a point where players won't even really have an interest in rebuilding them because they'll be wanting just to get tanks instead. And that's something that applies a lot less to Dawn of War 2. In Dawn of War 2, pretty much you pretty much want to keep any unit alive, and any unit can actually still be very helpful even towards the end of the game. And certain units are going to be more helpful, but even the very early units are still going to be very helpful. And there are some exceptions to that. The Blood Crusher is one exception to that as well. But there we had another incendiary barrage, probably going to decrew this pack. Although Helping Hans is trying his best to just get it out of that fire, but he's now also moving it into a corner again. And this KV-8 is going right up to it. The KV-8 should actually go for the pack first, because it will just get rid of that anti-tank threat. The KV-8 is not firing, but there it does decrew that pack. So Helping Hans, he still has one pack active, but it's also getting, it's also in a position where it's going to get decrewed too, with all of these 50 cal machine guns firing at it. The KV-8's actually not in such a good position, but Helping Hans is running out of anti-tank, and now the KV-8 is fine because there's no anti-tank to follow it up with. And Helping Hans is losing units left and right. He has a ton of pioneers, but they are also getting roasted. Helping Hans has very little. He's got this half-track. He's got also, like, no territory, and he's just losing units left and right. These half-tracks are also being very oppressive, and the KV-8 is weakened, but it's still going to be just fine, I think. Now, Locke has chosen to get a Panzer IV command tank. That is a very interesting choice. It's one that I don't know if it's a good choice, and my impression is actually that it's not, even though it's a good choice, but not the ideal one. I think there are possibly better choices. This Panzer IV command tank, at least my perception of it, is that it has a shorter cannon. It does have a shorter cannon than the regular Panzer IV, and my perception of that is that this is more, that shorter barrel cannon is going to be more for anti-infantry and won't be as effective as anti-tank. And I think right now, so I think Helping Hans would have actually maybe benefited more from a regular Panzer IV with potentially better anti-tank capabilities, or at least that's my impression. Helping Hans is getting absolutely mauled right now. He's going to lose this Vet 2 Grenadier squad. And he's just kind of, he's right here, pinned right in front of his base, and there's, oh my god! That was the railway artillery support strike from Helping Hans. I don't know what it killed. Unfortunately, I'm on Helping Hans' side, but it's a massively impressive artillery global. Possibly one of the most powerful globals in the game. I think it just shoots. It says fire 3 large caliber shells. Basically, the shells that it shoots are absolutely massive. They are just massive, and I think they do a lot of damage. They fire slowly, and I don't know if they're necessarily that accurate, but they're just massive and awesome, and yeah. So we still have that Panzer IV command tank. One of the benefits of the Panzer IV command tank over the regular Panzer IV is that it gives defensive benefits to pretty much to the units in the same territory, but I believe the territory needs to be owned, meaning it needs to belong to Helping Hans. We had another T-34 ram. The ramming T-34 was destroyed entirely. The Panzer IV is immobilized, which actually rarely happens. But it looks like Helping Hans was able to get some new AT on the field, some new packs, maybe some recruit existing packs, and it looks like he was able to take out the KV-8. And actually, Locke now has no tanks. He still has one of his half tracks, however. And Helping Hans is now actually somehow in a decent position after being pinned right in front of his base, seemingly having nothing he could do. And I also like that Locke is using that overdrive function on his half track to help keep it alive. What I don't really like, well, I was going to say I didn't really like that Helping Hans drove his half track away, leaving this anti-tank gun here to be decrewed and destroyed by the shock troops. But he was trying to keep the half track alive. Wow! So the shock troops just threw a grenade, and I believe they wiped out a Pioneer squad entirely that was trying to repair this Panzer IV. And this Panzer IV, I think now, is probably dead since it was immobilized. That immobilization doesn't normally happen from the T-34 ram. The T-34 ram usually gives a damaged engine critical to the tank that it rams. Damaged engine meaning that it only slows its speed down. That time it actually gave it an immobilized or a destroyed engine. Immobilizing it entirely. That is something that it's just I believe, a random chance to happen just occasionally. But every now and then it does actually happen, and it's obviously a whole lot worse to get your vehicle immobilized than to just have it slowed down. Wow, we have tank guns, anti-tank guns that are being destroyed entirely. Now the tank guns, the anti-tank guns, they do have their own health bars, and we've already seen, like if we look at this MG42 right here, it actually has a white bar representing its health, and those anti-tank guns in particular can be destroyed. And even when you recruit them, you might be recruiting the anti-tank gun at partial health. And you can also repair your anti-tank guns with Pioneers, with combat engineers as well. And it's very interesting because the anti-tank guns in this game, in a way, they function both like a vehicle and an infantry unit at the same time. They can't retreat like a vehicle, but they can be reinforced like an infantry unit, and they can be sniped like an infantry unit. So half-track has been kept alive. It's now Vet 2, and that does give it an increase in durability. Both half-tracks on both sides have been kept alive, and the Soviet half-track gets an increase in damage as well as a reduction in the damage it takes. This half-track right here, I mean this anti-tank gun, this Soviet field gun, has actually been camouflaged. That means that it comes from the global bar, or it's just one of the abilities of the doctrine that Locke chose. If we look here, anti-tank guns can camouflage, allowing them to ambush tanks, and I believe they also get a damage bonus from their first attacking out of camouflage. So it seems like Locke has been on the stronger end of things in the middle. He's been winning most of those fights. Helping Hans has at least managed to get himself back out there. Helping Hans is also playing the passive-aggressive capping war. He has a Vet 2 Grenadier squad just capping a point, getting him some extra resources, denying resources to Locke, as well as giving him the double cap on the VPs, which he really needs the VPs. And he also really needs to not send his Panzer Grenadiers in to die right in front of a massive Soviet forces, but he could have just had his attention elsewhere. Yeah, just at this point, Helping Hans, he lost a lot of VPs by being pinned in his base, and he really can't afford to give up many more VPs, pretty much. Now, this KV-8 is tough, in part because it can be such a good counter to the units that actually counter it, the tank guns, or the anti-tank guns. Now, a good counter to the KV-8 would actually be an actual tank, a real tank. Let's see if Helping Hans has any real tanks. He does not have any real tanks. And he's also a little low on resources to get real tanks. So he's relying a lot on anti-tank guns to deal with these vehicles, and Helping Hans is again being pushed into his base. And I mean, the good thing, at least for Helping Hans, is that he's still keeping the double cap, still at least staying in the game on VPs while he tries to get something together. And he's going to need some kind of real tank right now because they're pushing into his base. He's lost a lot of units. Helping Hans has lost a lot of units. But he's still playing that backcapping game. He's got these Vet 2 Panzer Grenadiers. He does have to be very careful about them retreating at some point and potentially having to retreat past that KV-8. Now, if we look at Locke, Locke definitely has more units, but one of the things that Locke is doing is that he's focusing on fighting in the middle, and he's winning his engagements because of that, but he seems to be not as well focused as Helping Hans is on map control, and Helping Hans is starting to win on the map control. He's getting all these points. He is, I'd say, actually more than half of the map when Locke is the one with the superior fighting force. And that's going to do a lot of things. If Helping Hans is getting more, if Helping Hans has more territory, he's actually going to be getting more resources, so he will actually be able to start producing the things he needs to get himself back into this game. Now, Helping Hans, he does have a regular Panzer IV on the way instead of that Panzer IV command tank. So that regular Panzer IV is a very good all-around tank, very good against infantry, as well as very good against vehicles. Or maybe it's not really very good at them, but it's certainly very capable of doing both. I actually find that it's very good at anti-infantry, although the Ostwind Flak Panzer is a bit better in that respect. And one of the great things about Helping Hans' position right now, and possibly because of all that resource capturing and backcapping he's been doing, is that he actually has enough resources to put a second Panzer IV on the field, and that would be a great position to be in, since that would help him. The main thing he would be worrying about would be the anti-tank guns, but he would be hard countering the KV-8 as well as that half-track, obviously. And the half-track might just overdrive out of there and just drive out of there and get out of there. But that would actually just force the half-track off, scare it off so that it's not on the field. And one of the reasons to keep a half-track alive, that both of these players have been trying so hard to keep at least one of their half-tracks alive, and being a lot less aggressive with them to that effect, is that they can reinforce from these half-tracks. And that's very, very helpful. On-the-field reinforcement. You get a lot of staying power out of that, since you're not retreating to base, you're not giving up territory by simply not being on the field at all. At this point, Locke is going to know that Helping Hans does have this Panzer IV. Now, Helping Hans does have enough resources or enough munitions to put pintle-mounted machine gunners on his Panzer IVs. And those Panzer IVs, they already technically start out with 2 machine guns. So if you get the pintle-mounted one, you get a 3rd machine gun. They have a machine gun right on the hull. They have another machine gun it looks like right next to the cannon, and then you get one on top as well. So the caps have actually, let's see, it's actually a 2-to-1 cap in Locke's favor. Wow, and we have, that Panzer IV needs to be very careful. Does throw down those smoke projectors to block itself, but we have another incendiary barrage going in, I think. Yes. So forcing all those infantry units off. And Helping Hans has actually chosen to get instead of another regular Panzer IV, he got a command tank, a Panzer IV command tank. So maybe it's nice to have that mix. It will give Helping Hans maybe just a nice complementary, varied army composition. And additionally, Helping Hans doesn't necessarily need hard anti-tank right now, but it would be pretty nice to have just to get rid of that KV-8. Let's take a look at Locke's resources. Although part of the problem is that Locke could easily put another KV-8 on the field, even if the one he has right now gets destroyed. Although what Locke is more likely doing is that he's saving up for this IS-2. And it seems like he's saving up for that IS-2 because of the kind of fuel that he has right now. 341 fuel. That IS-2 costs 300 fuel. That's a lot of fuel. It's actually a very prohibitive cost that makes it very difficult to get a vehicle like the IS-2 unless you were doing very, very well economically. And Locke is obviously doing well enough economically. And yes, there we do have that IS-2. Quite a big tank. It has a very big gun. One of the things I've at least heard about the IS-2, though... oh, there we go with that railway artillery again. I just love the effect. It's so huge and massive. And we're probably going to see another one, even though at this point it's not going to do anything. Since Locke is paying attention, he gets his anti-tank guns out of there. He actually has a stolen pack gun in addition to his Soviet field gun. Oh! Oh, there we go. But this IS-2, now Helping Hans is going to want some serious anti-tank. He's only got that one pack, and I think for the most part that's going to be the most serious anti-tank he has. Locke has also opted to put a top gunner, a pintle-mounted machine gunner, on his IS-2. Oops, I wanted to take a look at that machine gunner. That machine gun is quite big. But the IS-2, as far as I know, it is a very big tank. So it is classified as a heavy tank. There are many different classes of vehicles in this game. There are light vehicles, medium tanks, heavy tanks. These heavy tanks will deflect a lot of anti-tank rounds, meaning a lot of the anti-tank rounds will not penetrate. That means they will not do damage, and they will just bounce off, or maybe they will just do very minimal damage. But either way, it's negligible, and generally a failure to penetrate is really bad, and you really want to get penetration. Look at how many two grenadiers were taken down to about 25% health by that IS-2 tank gun. Now, what I have heard about the IS-2, however, is that it is supposedly more of an anti-infantry tank than a anti-tank tank. But it's probably still very good to the effect of being anti-tank, just because of just how tough it is. But we certainly see that it is very good as anti-infantry. We saw just how devastating it was. Oh no! I was seeing the half-track walk right in front of position. I thought the half-track was going to die there. We have the Panzer IV command tank, though, being very oppressive, decrewing one of the packs. And we also have, let's see, he's trying to decrew the divisional field gun, but the divisional field gun is it's just getting members by reinforcing from the half-track. The half-track needs to be taken out. That should have been the priority. Helping Hans is trying to, he's actually moving his Panzer IV now. Maybe he's finally going for this half-track. No, his gun is still aiming at the IS-2, and he's going to lose the Panzer IV, and he does lose the Panzer IV. So at this point, this half-track has been fantastic, considering it's a very underused weapon, or a very underused vehicle. Right there, Helping Hans managed to decrew the field gun, but it came at the cost of losing a Panzer Grenadier squad. But this half-track has been fantastic. With that on-the-field reinforcement, and this is a vehicle that's been pretty underused, and here we're seeing it put to very, very good use. Now again, we see that vehicle penetration factor, which is this Panzer IV command tank is shooting at the KV-8 and is not even doing damage because the shells from that command tank are just bouncing off. They're just bouncing off the armor. By contrast, at the same time, we do actually see shots from the pack actually penetrating and actually doing damage. There we saw a pack shot just bounce off the frontal armor of that IS-2. So that is just a feature, this whole thing of vehicle penetration. It is a feature in Company of Heroes 2, and as well as the original Company of Heroes, that really does not exist in Dawn of War 2. And it is something that it's interesting because there are definitely debates on both sides, and I don't really want this to become something where people are complaining, saying whether one game is better than the other. But it's just something that in Dawn of War 2, pretty much anti-tank or anti-vehicle weapons pretty much just do their damage. As long as they're in range and they fire, they will damage a vehicle. And that's something where, on the Dawn of War 2 side of things, that makes Dawn of War 2... it's a feature that is much less random, since the whole vehicle penetration thing is determined a bit randomly. It's actually determined by a number of statistics. The penetration value of the cannon that's shooting, whether it's a tank cannon or an anti-tank gun, as well as the armor of the tank that is being shot at. And some math goes on that determines the chance, the percent chance to actually penetrate the arm and do damage. So this is something where Company of Heroes is much more complicated in that respect. And it is also something that I imagine was added sort of as an element of realism, because I guess in real life that's part of what happens, that sometimes the armor of a tank will actually deflect tank shots. It will actually just deflect them, and I hear that was especially true of heavy tanks, as well as tanks that did not have strong enough guns. But it is also something that it's just a feature that is determined somewhat randomly, and that's at least something where Dawn of War 2 is much more consistent, much more... It just functions more consistently and less randomly.
Enemy forces are securing our territory.
And there we saw, again, this Panzer IV command tank really does seem to be not so good as anti-tank. We saw it took 2 shots right there at the KV-8. Both of them just bounced off. This IS-2 is a very, very big tank. HelpingHans certainly doesn't really have tanks that big. He's just got that Panzer IV command tank, which is, he's been getting that, and I feel like it hasn't been that great of a choice. I mean, I know it gives defensive modifiers to any units in that area, but it just, as a tank, it has not really been helping Hans that much with taking out the tanks. And now he's going to get another pack decrewed by the KV-8. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. Yes, it does. And at this point, I mean, HelpingHans really does need to make sure he has, like, anti-tank, because we've got some serious tanks on the field. Heavy tanks. Both of the KV-8 and the IS-2 are classified as heavy tanks. Which means they are going to have relatively high armor values, so you really need something with high penetration to reliably penetrate the armor of that tank. Now, the pack is a decent answer. The pack unfortunately missed and hit a tank carcass, but I think HelpingHans could potentially use a more powerful tank out on the field. Unfortunately, the most powerful tank he has is the Panzer IV. He's actually choosing to get a Stug assault gun. The Stug is... It functions as a tank destroyer. There have been I've been seeing some debates on other channels about what an assault gun is and versus a tank destroyer. And at least the impression that I've gotten is that an assault gun does not, a tank destroyer, alright. The terms tank destroyer and assault gun, they don't necessarily mean the same thing. An assault gun can be a tank destroyer, and a tank destroyer can be an assault gun, but they do not necessarily have to be the same thing. Now, in this case, the Stug that we have building is both an assault gun and a tank destroyer. What makes it an assault gun is the fact that it doesn't really have a turret. It just has this cannon mounted on the chassis, and it does not have the ability to rotate the turret the way a Panzer IV would. That gives it a much smaller arc of fire. Now, supposedly the real-life reasons for doing this is that you could mount a smaller gun a bigger gun on a smaller chassis. In this case, but there we have that railway artillery. A nice moment for it. Maybe gonna hit some other things. Looks like maybe we'll get the KV-8 taken down. Oh no, but if that Stu can just fire one more shot at the KV-8, it might take it down. No, the shot bounces off. So this Stug is... the Stug in this configuration is supposed to be like a tank destroyer rather than... well, it is supposed to be like a tank destroyer. Now, by comparison, there are units like the ISU-152, which is also considered an assault gun. Again, it does not have a turret. It just has that gun mounted on the chassis. But that one is actually, it's a howitzer. It can certainly do damage to tanks, but it's actually more of an anti-infantry, functions more as anti-infantry. So Helping Hans has been losing a lot of units again, but Helping Hans is really keeping himself in the game by capping. He's playing that game. He is a seasoned player. I don't know how experienced Locke is, but Helping Hans, although he is pretty much losing the fights, he seems to be the more experienced player, the more experienced Relic RTS player, and he's playing that passive-aggressive game and staying in the game a lot on the power of just keeping the victory points. This Panzer IV command tank has been very, very saddening, to me at least, with all the times that it is shooting at those KV-8s and not doing any damage. It really makes me wish Helping Hans just would have gotten a regular Panzer IV, which I believe has better penetration. At least the longer barrel makes me think it does. Now, Helping Hans has elected not to get any of the top gunners on any of his tanks. And I think he's doing that because he's saving the resources for those railway artillery strikes, which are so powerful, although it seems like with that railway strike, usually the first hit hits, and it's awesome. And then your opponent knows that you're doing a railway artillery strike, so then the second two hits do not hit because your opponent will actually just move out of the way. Oh no, half-track is in a lot of trouble. We also have a Vet 3 half-track from Helping Hans. Still the Vet 3 half-track from Locke. But Helping Hans is being a little more aggressive with his half-track, while Locke has pretty much retired it from combat, and he's just using it in that support role as a reinforcement point, which is giving him a lot of field presence. But again, Locke is just focusing on winning the fight in the middle, whereas Helping Hans has been keeping those VPs. And I even see that it looks like Helping Hans might even be going for a back cap over here. And that's really strange because Helping Hans has like no units. He has no units, and he's the one going for back caps. And now I don't even know what Helping Hans is saving for. Because Helping Hans is floating a lot of resources. He picked a doctrine where he doesn't have an ultra-powerful tank. He chose to get those Panzer IV support tanks, which, unfortunately, they don't really seem to have the kind of game impact that something like the Elephant or the Tiger can have. And certainly, maybe game impact is obviously some kind of very nebulous and subjective term. They certainly don't have the anti-tank capabilities that a Tiger or an Elephant would have. An Elephant would be very, very nice right now, since it would do very well against both the... It would do very well against the KV-8, as well as the IS-2. And to be honest, if Helping Hans did have the Elephant doctrine, and he had an Elephant, this half-track would probably just straight up be dead already, since that Elephant has a huge amount of range. as it is, let's go. Oh, we're still on Helping Hans' side, and he's actually yes, he's choosing to build a Pak 43. So I was going to say that maybe he needs a Pak 43 because he's hurting for some serious anti-tank, and it doesn't get much more serious than this Mega Pak. So this is a bit like the Pak 40, the regular anti-tank gun, except it is a whole lot bigger. Now it's going to be... Oh no! Helping Hans just lost his Vet 3 half-track. And Helping Hans is actually just replacing his half-track, so he's just maybe thinking in the same way. He wants to have that on-the-field reinforcement. Now, I mean, man, if...
The enemy is attempting to steal our sector.
It's actually somewhat frustrating in a way. These players... Helping Hans is obviously an experienced player, so he's got to be better than me. I'm assuming this Lot guy is better than me as well. But it is kind of frustrating to see him basically winning all of the fights and letting this game go on because of the VPs. And he has more infantry. He has more infantry units than Hans does, and Hans is the one who's being much more disciplined about getting those back caps so that he can stay in the game, keep the VPs at least to stall them out. And see, like right now, Locke is choosing to capture this territory point so he can get more resources. He should really just go over to this victory point. Helping Hans is so low on VPs. We actually have a new half-track that is also being upgraded to the Flammenwerfer, and now the conscripts are going for this VP. But is that a minefield quadrant? Yes, it is. So Helping Hans is actually using those German minefield quadrant. We can see the warning sign right here. But he should start pressing those conscripts with those flamers. And those conscripts are stepped on 3 mines so far. And it looks like, at the very least, this conscript squad is going to get forced off. I think... Yeah, I think Locke was trying to push it there. I think he wanted to try to just get the cap off. And so there he was actually desperately going after the cap. But I think he recognized, too, that he was going to risk losing that conscript squad entirely.
We have a new Panzer IV.
So now we finally have a regular Panzer IV, presumably has better penetration than that Panzer IV command tank. And actually this composition right here of the Panzer IV as well as the Stug is actually the Panzer IV, the Stug, as well as the Panzer IV command tank is probably pretty nice, because we saw the Panzer IV command tank has not been doing a whole lot to vehicles. Almost all of its shells were bouncing off that KV-8. The Stug, on the other hand, as a bit of a tank destroyer, certainly the Stug is pretty cheap and a little bit fragile, although it's going to be a bit more durable now that it has Vet 2, so it has significantly reduced damage taken. And we see that's represented by the armored skirts it now has. So that Stug is going to be quite a bit tougher. And then we have that Panzer IV, the regular Panzer IV, which is like kind of in between the Stug and the Panzer IV command tank. That longer cannon is presumably going to have better penetration than the short barrel cannon, although not quite as much as the Stug. And then that Panzer IV is better anti-infantry as the Stug. And hopefully with the defensive benefits that this Panzer IV would be giving all of the units in its territory, it would actually hopefully combine a bit nicely with the Stug and the regular Panzer IV for functioning as anti-tank. Needs to be very careful right now. And oh no, the Pak is about to get decrewed. It just did massive damage to that KV-8. Unfortunately, we need something else to come and save these guys. We have some... Oh, and the Pak 43 gets decrewed, which is really sad. We still have these regular Paks. I think maybe those regular Paks should have been covering the Pak 43, because obviously one of the big things about the Pak 43 is it was going to be very easily decrewed by these KV-8s. And that's certainly one of the disadvantages of a Pak 43 versus, say, maybe an Elephant. That Elephant is itself a tank, so it's very tough and would not get countered at all by a KV-8. Whereas this Pak 43, once those KV-8s actually got in range of the Pak 43, that Pak 43 was pretty much done. But both of these KV-8s are in serious trouble, out of control. One is out of control and explodes. The other one, both KV-8s are down. But now we have a stolen Pak 43 about to shoot at something. But I think the Pak 43 is going to get decrewed again by the Flammenwerfer. Oh, the Panzer IV command tank might go down. The regular Panzer IV is already down. I didn't even see it. Luckily, the Stug is still alive. Oh, wait, no. Maybe that was the regular Panzer IV, because we still have this Panzer IV command tank. Now, on Locke's side, he still has his IS-2, and it's Vet 2 at full health. And it just straight up takes out that Stug. Now that Stug is pretty nice. It is kind of like a tank destroyer, although probably not really on par with the Su-85. And that Stug ultimately, although it can function as a tank destroyer, it's probably going to be pretty hard to use that against something like an IS-2, just because of how well armored the IS-2 is. Now once again, Locke is winning on the fights. He's just straight up winning on the fights. He's back in the middle, and he is not capping enough. He's finally sending some shock troops over here to capture that point. Pak 43, unfortunately, I think will get decrewed again. We have some conscripts rushing it, but it does do some pretty good damage to that IS-2. Now we have, what do we have here that's shooting? We have another Pak 40. Oh, and now we have that Pak 43. It has been recrewed by... This Pak 43 is consistently changing hands, and I think it will change hands again as HelpingHans decrews his own pack. We're just waiting on this Soviet field gun. And it looks like Locke is trying to rush in, maybe trying to go for an anti-tank grenade. I don't think we've seen those. But yes, he does throw an anti-tank grenade. It does damage the engine. I don't entirely know if that was worth it, though. Although that does put the half-track in a position where it will not really be doing anything for a little bit, since it needs repairs. It has been slowed down. We still have this half-track that is not fighting anymore, pretty much. Only being very defensive with it when he is choosing to fight with it. Because it's Vet 3, 25 kills, and he's still just mainly using it as on-the-field reinforcement. Oh, wow. I think the IS-2 just straight up took out the anti-tank gun. Alright, this is now a good position, I think, for HelpingHans. He actually needs to reface his Pak 43 so that it can cover... We see the firing arc was actually not covering where that half-track or the IS-2 were, and he needs to reface his Pak 43. But HelpingHans is now in a position where he's running out of VPs. He's only at 24, 23. So his best chance, I think, would be to put a squad. Yeah, he's putting a Pioneer squad on that middle VP while he has Locke pushed off for repairs. HelpingHans is going for that half-track. Can he finally take out that half-track? Oh my god, that half-track is... Oh my god. That half-track is not going to die, pretty much. I think the only chance for that half-track to die is if it can wander into the firing arc of that Pak 43. And look at the range of that Pak 43. So as long as he can get sight on that half-track when it's in range of that Pak 43, and he has refaced his Pak 43. As long as he can get sight on it, I think as long as he can get sight on it when the half-track is in range of that Pak 43, then he'll finally be able to take out that half-track, I think. Because we saw that half-track, it only lost about a quarter of its health from the Panzer IV, and then it just used that overdrive ability to drive out of there way faster than the Panzer IV could ever hope to catch up to it. We're going to see another anti-tank grenade right there, but I think we're also going to maybe get a wiped conscript squad. It's certainly coming very, very close. The Panzer IV command tank is going after it, but obviously there must be some kind of defensive benefits with the Vet 2 that those conscripts have. Now, Helping Hans also has a massive amount of pioneers. I think he's mainly having a vehicle-based play. He actually has very few infantry-based fighting units. I mean, the pioneers can fight, but they suck at it. And then he basically has this machine gun. It's a stolen Maxim gun, which he probably recrewed with pioneers, to be honest. They look like, yeah, they are pioneers. So Helping Hans is pretty much just building pioneers to support his vehicles, and he now has 2 Panzer IVs, 2 regular Panzer IVs, and Helping Hans is just straight up not electing to go to tier 4. Now this is the choice that it seems perfectly viable, in fact, and in some ways I actually wonder if it's desirable. Now, if we look at the Pioneers, you can actually just look at what they can build. The Heavy Panzer Corps is actually not that expensive to build. It's actually pretty cheap to... it is actually pretty cheap to put that production building on the field. But that being said, like, what is he going to get out of a Heavy Panzer IV? A Heavy Panzer Corps. I guess ideally he would get some Panthers. But I guess one of the things is that I'm not really... I've been looking, at least from what I've seen of the Panther, it's a good tank. It's certainly a good tank. It actually seems to be a very good tank. But it almost seems like it's not really good enough to justify getting it when you can just get more Panzer IVs. And this is something that people might disagree on. But I've certainly seen a lot of Panzer IV play where people just stay in Tier 3. They just keep getting the Panzer IVs, and those seem to work well enough. And especially since people will usually get... It seems easier to forego Tier 4 than Tier 3. In part because Tier 3 comes a lot earlier, so you can get it out earlier. You can get a solid tank like that Panzer IV out much earlier. As opposed to... It's very, very tricky to just go straight to Tier 4, because then you're going without tanks for a very long time. And did we finally have that half-track go down? Nope. It just overdrived out of there. But there's still a tank here. This tank needs to aim at that half-track. I basically just want to see that half-track go down. I don't even know how much it actually matters that much that this half-track goes down. But at this point, it seems like Locke has maybe given up on it, except for the fact that he has a KV-8. I don't know if a KV-8 is going to save his half-track, and I think he's finally going to save... I think he's finally going to kill that half-track. Finally that half-track goes down. That is probably the longest a half-track will ever survive in any Company of Heroes 2 game ever. And now we have the KV-8. The KV-8 has actually switched to its 45mm cannon, as opposed to its flame projector. Now, it's only a 45mm cannon, which means it's not terribly strong. It's probably not going to even be that effective against other tanks, which... It almost makes me wonder why you would want to switch to it. Helping Hans is unfortunately getting most of his guns decrewed. Still has that Mega Pack, though. And he's trying to deal with the KV-8 as well as the... Oh! We had that railway artillery strike that actually caused a gunner killed critical. So that machine gunner is dead. You don't need to pay the resources to get it back. You actually just repair the tank, which makes absolutely no sense. You repair the tank to put a new gunner on. I guess unless some logic like the gun has been broken. And if we look at it, it actually does look... No, it doesn't look like the gun is broken. It doesn't make any sense. Let's not try to rationalize it. Oh, and there goes the half-track from Helping Hans as well. So... Half-track is down for Locke. Half-track is also down for Helping Hans, but he's getting another one. He really likes those half-tracks. He wants that on-the-field reinforcement.
Liberated the objective. Half-track has
And nothing is happening. Or things are happening. Mostly just strategic positioning right now, but it's not like exciting things to commentate on. We have some damaged tanks. Let's take a look at Locke's side. Now, oh my god, here's the bad position that Locke is in right now. The bad position is that he has these two big vehicles. They're both at low health. And Locke has no repair units. So he can't repair those tanks, and he does not even have the resources to put a repair unit on the field. That's a terrible position for him. That's obviously just a way in which he really came out on the bottom of those past few engagements. And that's very, very interesting, since repair units are obviously very important for your tanks. Tanks take a lot of time to repair. And if we notice, there was a point where Helping Hans pretty much just, like, in a way, he was like spamming Pioneers in the late game. And he wasn't spamming Pioneers to have them fight. He was spamming Pioneers to have them repair his vehicles and also to recruit things. Since you can recruit a weapon, any weapon team, you can recruit with any kind of infantry. It doesn't matter. You can recruit with any kind of infantry. But obviously, the thing is, different types of infantry are cheaper to reinforce. So it's better to recruit. It's better to recruit things with the cheapest infantry unit you can. In this case, Pioneers. And unfortunately, at this point, it looks like this game is going in Helping Hans' favor. The VPs are finally pretty much even. The IS-2 is chasing, but the IS-2 is going to get killed, I think. Yep, Panzer. Oh, it goes down. All right, so that's it. And the VPs are now in favor of Helping Hans. And I'd say he's probably going to win this game. We do have, but Locke has not given up. He's got a single conscript and a single shock troop in here. Unfortunately, I think they are going to get killed. I wouldn't be. Oh, I was wondering if like that one shot was going to take out both of them. But it doesn't. Locke at least manages to white out the VPs, but I don't think he's gonna do it. He's got nothing. He's got this KV-8. KV-8 can't cap. He's got conscripts in base, and he's got one squad of shock troops trying to decrew a Pak 43, which is just not a good idea. And he's crewing the Pak 43, which unfortunately is not going to work out either. He actually really missed his best chance there, which was to just straight up. Oh, I see what he needs. All right. The problem he had was that there's a bunker over this point right now, so he can't really capture this point because his shock troops straight up died trying to capture right in front of that machine gun bunker. I was going to say that his best chance was just to straight up go for the cap, but he wanted to recrew the pack so that he could take out that bunker and then capture the point. Very smart late play by Helping Hans to realize that his opponent has basically just doesn't have much, has just lost too much, so he just puts a bunker right in the middle, right in front of the BP, just to deny it, to actually stop Locke from doing what would be his only chance to win the game, which would be just to straight up go for the cap and not even worry about the fighting. But middle VP belongs to Helping Hans. He's getting the bottom one as well, and he's also about to decap the top VP. So this is, at this point, it's going to be a game in favor of Helping Hans. Throws a smoke grenade, I think, to try to block line of sight, but the Pioneers are here sighting. And yeah, at this point, there's nothing else that Locke can do to win this game. 5, 3, soon to be 2 and 1 and game. So that was an interesting game in a lot of ways. I think, however, this was a game that HelpingHans had posted, and he said, like, insane comeback. And it certainly was a huge comeback, but unfortunately I feel like a lot of that had to do with just Locke not capturing the points. He insisted on fighting when, I think, with a few backcaps, he could have won this game about 40 minutes ago. It ended up being a much longer, drawn-out game. Hopefully you at least enjoyed the action. And I think maybe what we saw here is just HelpingHans, even though he had trouble with some of the fighting, maybe just the more experienced player, and probably at least I would say the more experienced Relic RTS player. Maybe Locke is coming from like StarCraft or something, or Men of War, and is not really used to this Relic RTS gameplay. But he obviously must have had, even if he didn't have Relic RTS experience, he must have had some kind of experience that was helping him win engagements. He was no slouch as far as actually fighting it out, but he did not keep up with the victory points. In any case, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.